Hi, I want to read you an excerpt from my novel Bernie Waxman and the Whistling Kettle. Bernie Waxman's approaching his 75th birthday. He doesn't relish the idea of the party being thrown for him, partly because he doesn't like his family and partly because he's being harassed by the police. He spends much of his time musing about his current predicament and his personal history, right back to the origins of his family in England at the beginning of the 20th century and their lives as Jews in the East End of London. Here's the first little part of Bernie Waxman and the Whistling Kettle. My grandfather invented the whistling kettle. Some say it was Sholem Borgelman, who ran a sheet metal plant in Whitechapel, but it was my grandfather who lived at 52 Linthorpe Road, Stamford Hill. My father used to take me there on occasional Sundays. We'd sit in his cold, drafty kitchen. My grandfather always wore the same light brown dressing gown, stained with blobs of past meals and covered with ash from the perpetual cigarette that bobbed up and down from his lips as he spoke. "Now, who is this?" he'd ask as we entered, lifting his chin high and drawing out the who until it rose into the air like the whistle from the steam kettle he'd invented. He meant me. He addressed my father, but he looked at me out of the corner of his eyes. My toe curled inside my socks until I felt the wool scratch the soles of my feet. A fire spread across my face. The voice squeaking inside my chest barely escaped my mouth. My father's hand propelled me forward so that I stood with my knees touching the rough cloth of his dressing gown, my feet rubbing against the gaping flaps of his slippers in which his toenails lurked. "I'm Bernie." He'd stare at me, his eyebrows raised, the matching toothbrush bristles of his moustache quivering. "Bernard," I'd add, by way of greater clarity. But it was never enough. "Bernie? Bernard? Bernie who? Bernard whom?" The shoulders lifted almost up to his cheeks, the elbow clamped to his sides, the palms of his hand outstretched in utter incomprehension. "I'm Bernie Waxman." "Which Bernie Waxman would that be?" Now his face came within inches of mine. Droplets of sweat shimmered among the stubble on his face. Nicotine-stained teeth gripped the cigarette. By now, my chest was heaving. "I'm your grandson." "But I had so many grandsons." The "so" drifted up into another drawn-out steam whistle, hovering around the room, wraith-like, until it insinuated itself into my shivering body. The shivering was partly the damp, chilly atmosphere of Grandpa's kitchen, partly the agony of the interrogation into my identity. I couldn't think of any other grandsons. Were there others I didn't know about? And how could there be another one called Bernie Waxman? All I knew was that this happened every time, stopping only when he rasped out a laugh that sputtered smoke and spittle into my face. Once my grandfather had tired of tormenting me with his questions, he regaled my father and any of my uncles who were visiting with long rants that were beyond my capacity to understand or were overshadowed by my shame at not being able to identify myself. That's just the beginning of Bernie Waxman and the Whistling Kettle. Hope you enjoy it, and you can take a look at my website, www.zevbagel.com, and see what other goodies are on there. Thanks for watching.